In the wake of Birmingham and the president's proposed civil rights legislation, Negro leaders announced a mass march to galvanize nationwide support for civil rights. For decades, this had been the dream of labor leader A. Philip Randolph.
Negroes want the same things that white citizens possess. All of their rights. They want no reservations. They want complete equality. Social, economic, and political. And no force under the sun can stem and block and stop this civil rights revolution which is now underway.
Randolph first raised the idea of a mass march in 1941, when he used it as a threat to encourage President Franklin Roosevelt to end segregation in federal government agencies and among defense contractors. 20 years later, Randolph's dream became reality. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom would be the greatest mass protest in the nation's history.
Freedom Now movement, hear me. We are requesting all citizens to move into Washington. We are pushing for jobs, housing, desegregated schools. This is an urgent request. Please join. Go to Washington.
Thousands set off for the nation's capital to show their support for civil rights. They came by car, by bus, by rail, from L.A. and San Francisco, from Cleveland and Chicago, from Jackson and Birmingham. Many who opposed civil rights predicted violence, but the march organizers went to great lengths to ensure none came. Security volunteers, equipped with two-way radios, would provide a first line of defense.
This is Freedom 2 to Equality 1.
250,000 participants, some say even more, converged on the mall in Washington, D.C.
We're going to walk together. We're going to stand together. We're going to sing together. We're going to stay together.
In his hands he's got the wide world.
Speakers and performers inspired the crowd. But the one who enunciated their universal call for justice most passionately was Martin Luther King Jr.
Because I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I think history was written today which will have its effect on coming generations with respect to our democracy, with respect to our ideals, with respect to the great struggle of man toward freedom and human dignity.
Everyone agreed it was a historic milestone in the civil rights movement. It awakened millions of Americans to the quest for freedom and equality, and stressed to Congress the widespread support for the issue.
I believe that the real significance of what we have started here today is that we have laid the groundwork for the building of a functioning, broad coalition of Americans from all walks of life.
The other thing is that we did produce a non-segregated march.
And I think this march will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, demonstrations for freedom and human dignity ever held in the United States.
President Kennedy welcomed the leaders at the White House. His ambivalence toward civil rights had evaporated. With a 60% approval rating, the president looked forward to a second term in which he would consolidate public support for his civil rights proposals and press Congress to enact legislation. But it was not to be. On November 22, 1963, the president was assassinated in Dallas, Texas.
The greatest leader of our time has been struck down by the foulest deed of our time.
As deep grief swirled around Washington, the new president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, sought to reassure the nation.
Today, John Fitzgerald Kennedy lives on in the immortal words and works that he left behind. John F. Kennedy told his countrymen that our national work would not be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration. But he said, let us begin. Today, in this moment of new resolve, I would say to all my fellow Americans, let us continue.
Johnson vowed to revolutionize America with federal aid to education, tax cuts to stimulate business, conservation programs, and to pass the civil rights legislation proposed by the late president. He called it the Great Society. But Lyndon Johnson also inherited a war in Vietnam.
If this little nation goes down the drain and can't maintain her independence, ask yourself what's going to happen to all the other little nations.
In 1963, it was no bigger than a fist on the horizon, but it cast a long shadow over the new president and all he hoped to accomplish at home.